My name is John Passfield. I'm going to read from my novel, Cyril Passfield Out West, and I'm going to call this video Stooking, Stooking, just one word. And it's going to be an entire chapter. I'm going to leave some things out, but I'm going to read from one chapter, chapter 12, but more of that in a moment. Here is the cover. Cyril Passfield Out West is the title. A novel by John Passfield. Now, John Passfield, as I said, is me. Cyril Passfield was my father. He is dead, but he went out west in the summer of 1932 as a 23-year-old, and he's on your right side, bending down, blowing on a fire. And his friend Charlie, who was also 23-year-old, went out with him. So this is an action photo, if you like. It's taken in the summer of 1932. It's an actual photo. Railroad ties in the background. The larger snapshot had a train up on the hill there, but it was nice to just kind of isolate and focus on my dad and Charlie. So it's a nice photo, and it's nice that it came through. It's a 90-year-old photo, 1932, and here we are in 2020, so we're only 12 years away from 100 years. So that's the photo. And the novel is all about their trip out west. Let me read the summary on the back cover. In June 1932, in the depths of the Great Depression, two part-time railway workers, 23-year-old Cyril Passfield and his friend Charlie Thompson, decide to leave their hometown, St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada. They go on the hobo, join the great army of the unemployed who are riding the trains back and forth across Canada. As they travel west, they hope to get work in the harvests, or maybe hop a freighter in Vancouver and see the world. The novel is based on Cyril Passfield's diary of the summer of 1932. So at any stage in your life, you wonder what can happen, what comes next. Oh, well, maybe we'll get on a freighter and see the world. Maybe not. That's the way life goes, right? So it's that story of the summer of 1932, a true story, but I turned it into fiction. I've gone into more detail in other videos, so I'll just summarize my sources. A true story, yes, and based on written sources as well. Of course, I knew my dad till he died at age 72, and I was half his age, 36. But also I had written records. My dad kept a diary that summer, so day by day he wrote in point form and in pencil events, not in a lot of detail, as you would understand. So I had my dad's diary after he died, and I typed it up. I also had an interview with my dad after he'd retired. I asked him to write his memoirs. He wrote about 6 pages, so I interviewed him. I made up many, many questions, asked him all kinds of questions. How'd you and my mom meet? What were your jobs when you were a boy? What were your various jobs in the railroad? All kinds of things. So I had that printed. And then I sent the diary after I typed it up after my dad's death to Charlie, a fellow who went out west with him, and I met him and tape recorded. So he was able to elaborate on some of the things in the diary and also some of the things in my dad's interview. So my dad at the time wrote a diary. 45 years later, I did an interview with him. 54 years later, after these events, I interviewed Charlie. So the structure of the novel then, I made it 17 chapters. In brief, they leave St. Thomas and ride the rails north of Superior and out west. They are hobos in British Columbia because there's no work. They go and work as cowboys in northern Alberta. That's work, enjoyable work, even hard work but enjoyable. No money. It's a friend of theirs who's homesteading. He can't afford to pay them. Then they become farmhands in Saskatchewan. $2 a day, good money, very, very hard work. And at the end of about 5 months, they ride the rails home. At the end of the novel, at the end of that adventure. The structure of the chapters. There are 8 segments of action in each chapter. And if you think of the 8 segments as my fingers, don't count them because there aren't 8, but in between there are 7 openings, and I put thought in there. We go through life, and I'll just explain a little more since this video concerns one chapter only, so it contains all levels of thought. I'll just explain that a little more before I actually get into the reading. First of all, this reading is a complete chapter. In the diary, this part of the action is covered by the repeated word stooking. as my dad worked all day, ate supper, and then flopped into bed exhausted, and the next day was out stooping in the fields again. So this is chapter 12, really based on one word repeated day after day, stooking, 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 too tired to write. Okay, now, it's my feeling, and this is why I write my novels this way, my chapters this way, that we're very conscious of the thing we're doing. Uh, and I've used the analogy of driving a car. If you're driving a car, you're going somewhere. You're thinking of the driving, it's the car itself. You're thinking of stop signs and all the other indicators of how you should drive. You're thinking of pedestrians, other traffic, and so on. So that's your conscious level of thought. Below that, you're thinking of where you're going. What are you going to do when you get there? What happens if the boss says no, no raise? What if it happens if he says yes? In fact, I'm going to make you vice president. So what will happen? That's the future. You're thinking about the past. What about last time you asked the boss for a raise? Was he hard to get along with after that? And so on. Did you think of letting you go because you're such a troublemaker in terms of never being happy with your salary? So you think of all these things. The car radio, the national debt, and the environment, the problems with the environment. So all these things are operating at these levels. Um, the past, my first job was different than this job. You're thinking all these levels, conscious and subconscious, as you go along. So that's how I write my chapters. Another analogy I like is this: you're looking at a cliff face, and over time there are different levels that have been layers that have been deposited. The ash level from volcanoes, sand level, uh, clay level, soil level from all the trees that were rotting. There might even, if it's deep enough, you'll have oil and all these deposits in it. So that's a chapter. You get little segments of all of these layers as you look up and down a cliff face. That's a chapter. Now, if you follow them along, that's a novel. You get a little bit of the clay layer in chapter 12, the one we're going to read today, and it may not make perfect sense. It's not a whole story. But if you read chapters 1 to 12 and 12 to 17 in this novel, you follow all the layers along. So I'm going to leave a few things out of chapter 12 because since you haven't read up until chapter 12, some of them would need more explanation than I want to give now. We're going to read most of these layers of subconscious and subconscious thought in chapter 12, with the most conscious layer being stooking in the fields of Saskatchewan in the summer of 1932. And now to read from the novel itself, chapter 12. And I'll just make a few comments here and there, but mainly it's just the words of the novel. The thoughts in the mind of Cyril Passfield as he's working. On our slow way out to the fields, stooking starts today. Not looking forward to it, but we came out here to earn money, and that's what we'll do. Stories of wearing out leather gloves and fainting from heat stroke in the fields, and fellows quitting after just a few days and going home. Maybe we should have stayed in Alberta, got ourselves a job on a ranch. Riding the range and fixing fences looks good right now. Leaving my Stetson on the dresser, wearing our overalls from now on. Could be a month of nothing but stooking in the fields. And then these diary entries that I mentioned, stooking, 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 just one word a day. And he might have written them, on his day off at the end of the week, and because he would just work all day. They all would. Go home start in the dark, go home in the dark, eat, flop into bed, get up in the dark. But images run through his mind at some level. We don't know what level. Feasting on a find of wild strawberries. A man on foot amid a herd of menacing cattle. A puppet gaining control of a puppeteer. Now, if you read the whole novel, there's more on each of these images elsewhere, but here they're just one-line images. Workers loading freighters at the dock, a Saturday morning confab in a barber shop, a girl washing her hair in a metal tub. And then questions. I think we all question ourselves, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And sometimes friendly questions, and sometimes there's a needle there. We needle ourselves sometimes over some issues. So, do you like a life of stooking? 14-hour days in the fields? Is this what your life is going to be? The self-questioning the self. We're also conscious of the clock ticking. 7:45, 7:46, 7:47, 7:48. My life is ticking away as I sit here reading. Your life is ticking away as you sit there watching. It's in our mind somewhere that this is the case. Stooking. Up at 4 a.m., feeding the horses, gobbling breakfast, and out to the fields. Stooking. Putting a tick on the corner of the calendar. Monday, August 15th, 1932. Tuesday, August 16th, 1932. Wednesday, August 17th, 1932. Thursday, August 18th, 1932. Stopping at 9 p.m. at night when it's growing too dark to see. Not an ounce of energy left. Back to the barn, take care of the horses, something to eat, then fall into bed and up at 4 a.m. Stooking is the word. And then a voice over the radio, maybe as you're gobbling down your supper. Income from agriculture is down 94% in the prairie provinces. Well, I got that out of a book. I wouldn't make up that extreme a number, 94%, but that's in your mind too. And then as he goes through his day, he thinks of his life. So the work dried up at home. I was a brakeman and Charlie was a fireman on another railroad. We were swimming at Pinafore Park one afternoon. Used to be lots of work at the ice house, one of us said. All winter sliding blocks of ice up a wooden ramp. Now it's summer and we just lie in the sun and swim. Both of us living at home with our folks, only a few days' pay a month, putting pennies on the table to pay our bills. So that's why they went out west. They weren't getting enough work on the railroad. Like, you're going to live in your mom's house. My dad's mom was a widow. And, not put significant money on the table. So they went out west, both of them. Stooking, gathering up 8 sheaves, 2 and 2 and 2, standing them up in a shock, all leaning together, drinking a gallon of water a day, wearing the fingers out on a pair of thick leather gloves, working in a field at least a mile long, stopping for a drink and a stretch for the back. Be back in this field tomorrow and stooking all day again. 700 acres, all waiting for stooking. 700 acres, all waiting for me. Stooking, that one word. Stooking in the fields, flopping into bed. Ever summarize your life sometimes? There it is. More thoughts of the past and the situation. There's work way out in the west. They're expecting a bumper harvest. We should go on the hobo and earn ourselves some cash. We even knew a man in Alberta. Worked with him on the Anderson farm. Why not go out there and try to find steady work? Hard to pull myself up by the roots? What roots did I have to pull? People leave home so there would be one less mouth to feed. Writing stooking in my diary. Just stooking and nothing more. Too tired to write a thing besides the word. Day after day after day. Sleep and eat and work. $2 for every day. Bed and board included. Clean the barn on rainy days for just your food. Watch broke on the second day. Have to tell the time by our shadows. Our shadows are moving as slow as they can. When the sun isn't shining, we can't tell time at all. When it's dark, we knock off work and head to the barn. Then 3 more images at some level of consciousness or subconsciousness. A rider taking a horse up over the jumps. A diary with all the pages blank. A young man with a scar on his neck. More dates. Tuesday, August 30th, 1932. Wednesday, August 31st, 1932. Thursday, September 1st, 1932. So the turning over of the month from August to September. More questions, self-asking self. Fingernails breaking on the sheaves. Thistles prickling your blistering palms. Bludgeons for endless hours by the sun. 3 more images from recent experience and his whole life. A drunk lying in puke in an alleyway. A man sleeping under newspapers on a park bench. A rubber truncheon slashing at a hand. This was the railroad police whose job it was to keep the hobos off the trains. Heavy mist this morning. Too wet to work, Mr. Cullum says. Making a couple of bridles, leather and binder twine. Trying to break the colts to lead. They cavort like a pair of puppies. Too young to pull a cart. Enjoy your freedom while you can. There's work ahead. Staging our own small rodeo, taking turns showing off, leaping on and off, a galloping horse without a saddle, riding 2 or 3 at a time and lassoing a fence post. Then the mist clears up and we stook all afternoon. Stooking, that word. More news on the radio. Manufacturers are responding to this depression by laying off workers and cutting production. A player in your mind, eh? The news, the news, the news. More thoughts of the past and the current situation. We went all the way out to the coast and back. Every day was like a bubble of rain or a bubble of sunshine, until it burst. Sleeping in ditches, sleeping in boxcars, sleeping in comfortable beds. Stomach empty, stomach full, work or play. Place to stay for a couple of hours, place to work for a couple of days, place to harvest $1 or two with your blistering hands. Stooking all day, stooking all day, stooking all day. Driving the binder during the spell off at noon, enjoying it more than I used to do when I first started driving. No more getting eaten alive. Got eaten alive the very first day. Couldn't believe how much salve I had to rub on my neck. Mr. Cullum told me to use a binder whip, just in time to keep the flies from stripping my carcass. I forgot this here's your first time out in the West. Better tell you guys while you still got skin to save. Just you tie a piece of dark cloth right up high on the whip. That way, you won't be bothered by them flies. It'll lure them away from that feast on the back of your neck. Sure enough, works like a charm, working the binder the rest of the day till quitting time. And then that word, stooking. Reading in the barn, training 2 young colts. Of course, reading in the barn when it's raining. Actually, I was born right here in Canada, about a year after my parents came over on the boat. Don't know much about England. That's all in the past. I figure everyone ends up somewhere. Don't think of myself as having roots. I could easily plant myself here or in the East. Every seed burrows into the ground. None of them worries about trying to locate their ancestral roots. You're going to be you, whether you're here or on the moon. And then a story. Again, just something running through his head. Charlie's story about the dance. For the men at the dock where we're unloading sacks of grain. 6 of us go to this dance in town. We stop at a garage and Ivan buys us something to drink. A pop bottle filled with whiskey. On the way, we pass a bottle and take a few sips. We get to the dance and things are all right. Fiddlers playing and people dancing. Me and one of the girls are cutting a rug. Then, all of a sudden, I lose my footing, dancing sideways and hitting a post. Sitting on a chair with my legs all rubber and my stomach on fire. What's going on? Why can't I walk? Why can't I see? Thinking I'll die a couple of 1,000 miles from home. Turns out the guy at the garage thought we knew. That was pure whiskey in that bottle. Wheat whiskey and nothing else. Pure alcohol. It hits Ivan a little later. First whiskey he'd ever bought. Both of us lying on the floor as the others all dance beside us and the fiddlers play. A wagon and pony brings us back home when the dance is over. A couple of days of feeling numb, and we both come around. Time is passing for you, for me, for these guys working in the fields. 7:45, 7:46, 7:47, 7:48. Time is passing. 3 images somewhere in the mind. A mother snipping roses on a veranda. A freighter weighing anchor for Hong Kong. A child who is searching for a little red ball. And then these 3 nagging questions again. Are you numb from exhaustion? Are you a miner digging coal? A donkey pulling an overloaded cart? And the last action section of thought. Up at 4:45 to get the chores done. Off to Watrous for the day. Just like one big family. All of us cramming into the car, surprised at the size of the buildings. Never swum in salt water before. Charlie and me can hardly believe it. You don't sink down. You just skim along on the surface like a water bug, washing the salt off at the tap and then getting a little sun and diving in again. Like diving into a sponge. Not like the water in Lake Erie. Never think to close my mouth, getting out and rinsing the salt water off my tongue. So hard work in the blistering sun, blistering hands as a result, but they were treated like family. This is a true story. And they took days off and had good times, like going to Watrous to swim in the springs there. So that's it. That's chapter 12. It's like conscious thought, working in the fields and slugging away, and lower level conscious thought and even subconscious thought. What's the world coming to with this news on the radio and so on? And That's chapter 12, just one of 17 chapters in the novel. And as I say, the things that seem a little cryptic, um, they're the things that on the cliff you'd only see a little bit of if you went up and down the cliff. But if you read the whole novel, these things are discontinuous narratives, but chapter by chapter, they are narratives. They're image arcs. They're minor cycles that run through the whole 17 chapters. So in a moment, I'll just summarize this video. And now, as a conclusion, I'll have a few websites in a moment. But first, I'd like to read a passage from my journal. If you go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, 2 free books, 2 book-length free books. If you click on notebooks and go down and click on the out west icon, you'll get my planning notebook. That's from the first moment of, gee, I think I can write a novel about my dad's trip out west, right to a full, almost 50,000 word rough draft. And that's a book length and it's free. And then as I polish the novel, a month, 6 weeks, I write a journal of reflection, just all the topics that I've covered, young people starting out, jobs I've had, jobs my dad had, all kinds of things, including, worldwide depression and the kind of things that are going on now. This was like maybe 2 years ago that I wrote the novel in the world that are kind of parallel to depression, problems we have, what to do about them. Not that I have any great solutions, but just how we live our lives like privately with our family, our friends, our coworkers, and how we live in the world, the news coming over the radio, the TV, the internet, and how we live with that, we respond to that, we're affected by that more and less. So all that in my journal. So here's a section from the journal, a very short section. It's been a very unique experience to be able to work so closely with my dad's own writing, and in a sense to share the writing of the novel with him. I think of this as my dad's novel. All along I have thought of this as my dad's novel, and in a number of ways it is. At the same time, it's a creative, poetic novel, which has many elements which my dad would not have written, and which he would be baffled to read in a novel, which purports to be the thoughts of himself at 23 years old in the summer of 1932. So that's the passage I wrote as I was polishing. So yes, it is my dad's novel. It's almost all fact, information, that is true, but it's arranged by me poetically, and I've added, layers in that are me. So it's my dad's novel first. Secondly, it's our shared novel, John and Cyril, dad and son, together producing a novel. And then thirdly, it's my novel, things in there that my dad wouldn't recognize and maybe approve of, not the kind of novel he would care to read. My dad used to say, if it didn't happen, I don't want to read about it. He was a great reader. It was all nonfiction, nothing to do with fiction. Didn't happen, I don't want to read about it. Okay, so websites. It's available on Amazon. I just hold it up again. Cyril Passfield Out West is the title of a novel by John Passfield. It's also available at my publisher, Rocks Mills Press, ROCKSMILLSPRESS.com, rocksmillspress.com for more information and a chance to purchase the novel. Then, of course, johnpassfield.ca for the 2 free books, free access to them, all about my thoughts as I was writing and then as I was polishing the novel. And lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.